Designed to Heal listeners, Dr. Ben wanted to let you know about an incredible seminar happening Saturday, August 14th in Central Florida. Achieve Wellness will be hosting The Informed Family, featuring several favorite past guests of the Designed to Heal podcast, including Del Bigtree, host of The High Wire, Dr. Terry Harmon, featured on the Truth About Cancer documentary, and finally, Dr. Cornelia Franz, author of Common Sense Pediatrics and one of Central Florida's favorite naturally minded pediatricians. This will be one of the largest live events Dr. Ben has ever held, and we'd love to have you join us. For tickets or more information, visit the link in the show description. The Informed Family, Saturday, August 14th, Central Florida.
I'm Dr. Ben Rawl. Do you know where the most amazing doctor lives? You may be surprised to learn that it's actually right inside of you. Yet, today's healthcare model is built on a foundation that the greatest doctor instead comes in the form of pills, potions, lotions, even surgery. So listen in, because what if the majority of what you have been told about health and healing is not only wrong, but actually harmful to you? One thing is for sure. When you work with your body and not against it, you'll begin to discover that you are in fact designed to heal.
I want to welcome everybody back to another episode of Designed to Heal. We are passionate about the body's designed to heal, believe that it is an amazing device. Dr. Ben Rawl, you know, it's amazing when you text me and you say, I'm going to like who's on the show today.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Yep.
So who do we got, man? What's going on today?
We've got a kind of a, to many of our listeners, I would say a hero. Certainly somebody that you might not know by name exactly, but you certainly would know that the work that he's done, and he's been an advocate for vaccine awareness, and but has a unique take on it, on a way that really gets more attention. I've been part of some of his events that he's helped organize. It's really, I guess it would probably, I'm sure it's even international by now, but like anybody that's in this space, there's always a story. Nobody gets in this game for the glory or the money or anything like that. You're doing it because usually you've had a very intense personal experience. And so the person we have on today is the founder of V for Vaccine. His name is Joshua Coleman, and he's been to Florida a lot. He's been very helpful to our movements here as far as medical freedom and awareness of vaccines. But we're so grateful. But he's done so much, and he has a story. We're going to journey through that today. But I'm going to let him kind of give his background a little bit, and then we'll take it from there. But thank you so much coming to us live from California today, Mr. Joshua Coleman. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on, man.
So tell us, if you don't mind, kind of how you like to be described, kind of where you at, a little bit of your journey, and we'll just ask questions along the way.
Well, I didn't really know much about vaccinations growing up. Other than I got however many I did, throughout the school years. And, when I had my firstborn son, Otto, that's when I started to research, or at least I thought I was researching vaccines, which probably equated to probably not going past the first 10 or so search items that came up through Google when I looked it up. Okay. And felt like quickly, overwhelmed by the whole thing, and was like, wow, all these different ingredients, different vaccines for different diseases, and just kind of threw my arms up and said, I guess we'll just listen to the doctor and do it. So is it
kind of that classic, Joshua, just kind of that classic, like, hey, they're smarter than me. If it was really this bad, it wouldn't even be available. I guess if I'm going to just give in, I'll just, like you said, I'm just going to trust them and we're going to wish for the best kind of a thing. I mean, not to put words in your mouth, but.
Yeah, 100%. The only thing that I had heard negative about vaccination was I had seen the Larry King interview with, Jim Carrey, Jenny McCarthy, and J.B. Handley. And I bought into what they were saying. I thought, okay, this sounds like it is an issue. But when it came to my time to make a choice, I just kind of thought, oh, that's probably rare.
Okay.
Because I didn't know anybody who had, or at least at the time, I didn't know that I actually knew somebody who had had a child impacted that way.
Okay. So then what happens? You decide to go ahead and move forward?
So we go ahead and we're vaccinating him according to the schedule. And at 17 months old, my son wakes up completely unable to walk one morning. And, the nightmare begins. I take him in. They quickly give him an MRI.
Up to that point, normally healthy kid, right? Developing normally every milestone.
He was, absolutely, 100% cognitive. running, walking, climbing, everything. Can't walk. And of course, the first thing I did as a father is I thought, okay, he's twisted his leg in the crib.
Sure.
And it hurts to stand. That's why he's not standing. I'm not thinking he's lost muscle control. So I'm meticulously, touching his feet and legs, trying to find an injury, because I'm certain that's the reason why. Yeah. And there's nothing. He's not in pain. There is no pain there at all, which was disturbing. And of course, I bring him to the hospital, and I say that. That's the first thing I say is, my son can't walk, but he's not injured. And I can't find any injury. He's not in pain. And I think that came off bad to the doctors. I think they thought I had hurt my child. Because I came in saying he's not hurt, but he can't walk.
So like a red flag or something. I didn't touch him, but yeah, he can't. Gotcha.
Yeah. I mean, I was just speaking my truth.
Yeah.
So they checked him for an injury, and they found nothing. And then of course the next morning it was way worse, and that's when they had an MRI, saw that it was transverse myelitis. And the doctor's looking it up because I think he'd only seen one person with transverse myelitis before. And then
transverse myelitis being an infection of the spinal cord, does that be an overall just generalization of that hits a certain level? Is that how you describe that?
Yeah. I mean, vaccinations are ultimately training your body by allergic reaction to, when it comes into contact with disease, to attack it. And his immune system got it confused and started attacking the myelin around his spinal cord.
Okay.
And just did a lot of damage.
And it was at a level, usually it attacks a certain level. So a certain level in his spine, do you recall the area, or do you know?
I don't. Yeah. I used to remember if it was T11 or T9, whatever it was.
So lower spine, and that affected. So he essentially paralyzed. Is that correct?
That's right. Okay. Flaccid paralysis from the waist down. Yeah.
Okay.
And they brought up vaccines right away. Yeah, they said, has he been vaccinated recently? And I don't know if I would have ever put two and two together. And I said, yeah, he was just vaccinated. And they said, well, it was probably that or an airborne virus. And has he been sick? Has he had any symptoms? And I said, no, he's not been sick. Not a couple weeks ago. No, he's not been sick at all. Well, maybe he was sick and you didn't notice. No, I would notice. Yeah. Believe me, I would know if my kid, especially that one, my two boys, he's definitely my older one's my more dramatic one. So yeah, so then at that point, I was told this is the 1 in a million. You are the unlucky one. But vaccines are important. And I just started working on recovery. So I wasn't researching vaccines or anything. The next 2 years, I was going to and from the East Coast on Johns Hopkins, doing physical therapy, electrical stimulation in his legs, anything and everything I could do, anything and everything I could afford.
Yeah.
I mean, there's like a million things you could do.
Yeah.
I had people talking to me about hyperbaric chambers, and that sounded really great. But again, I couldn't afford to do everything. So that was one thing I didn't get to do. Of course, if I could go back now, I would have definitely made it happen somehow.
Yeah.
But then I think it was around 2014 that I'm watching the news.
So how was that process? Just for those people that are getting new to you and your story, where did that end with your son? I know that there's been cases of transverse myelitis that can kind of heal, right? Kind of spontaneous recover. And then there's some where it's lifelong, or what seems to be lifelong. Where does it stand right now with your son, if you don't mind?
Yeah. So he, what all my research had showed is that all the recovery happens really primarily the first 2 years after the injury. And it gives you like a third chance of full recovery, a third chance of no recovery, and a third chance of partial recovery. Okay. So Otto ended up getting partial recovery. Okay. So he went from having zero sensation down there to now I would say he's probably got somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 to 60%, maybe even more, 70% of his feeling back down there. I can touch him on the toe just barely, and he knows he's being touched.
Okay.
But of course, he tells me it doesn't feel like the rest of his body. So I think it's kind of pins and needles, probably after you've had that shot from the dentist in your cheek, you could feel it, but not 100%.
Yeah.
So I think he has those feelings, and a little bit of the muscles sort of in his pelvis area came back. So he is able to use his hip flexors to sort of, bring his legs forward. And it is deceptive. People see him doing that and they go, oh, he's moving his legs. It's like, well, No, it's the hip flexors. They can do an awful lot. And of course, first time I saw him move his knee like that, I freaked out. It was like, oh my God. But then of course I found out he was just using other muscles to do that.
So he's in a wheelchair.
That's right.
Yeah. And that's kind of where it sits right now. That's
right.
Okay. So 2 years in, knowing what you've just described there, you're kind of saying, well, maybe this is what we've got. And then what happens?
Well, there was all this stuff about the measles in Disneyland.
Right.
And I mean, I think that was the real, I'd been doing a little bit of research before then, but really what it was is, I knew a little bit about vaccines now. And of course, now I have an interest. If I see an article about vaccination, I'm reading it. And
did they say it was vaccine? Is that I'm just curious, Joshua. Did they say, did it ever get fully acknowledged? Even you're at Johns Hopkins and some of the other places. Is that the kind of final thought from the healthcare team that it was a vaccine injury? You were the one in the million, as they say.
Yeah, verbally. They never wrote it down.
Okay.
But what happened is when we went to Johns Hopkins, we saw. There's only a couple of specialists in this country, at least, that deal with transverse myelitis, and so we saw those specialists, and I corresponded with others, and so they did testing at Johns Hopkins to really try to narrow it down and figure out what it was, because there are things that cause transverse myelitis that can be reoccurring, and they wanted to find out if it was one of those things, because if it was, they were going to take preventative measures. Gotcha. So it was never to discover what caused it. They were not interested in finding out whether it was a vaccine injury or not. Is this Lyme disease? Is this going to happen again? Do we need to prepare for this? And of course, it's sort of like a process of elimination that they narrowed it down to vaccination.
Okay.
So that's where it's at. And it was a verbal conversation with me and the doctor. Yeah. And, I wish I had it in writing, and I at the time I didn't really understand the whole stigma around it. But I do, thinking back, I don't think if I would have asked him to write that down that he would have anyway.
All right. Gotcha. So now you're moving in, you're more aware. You're obviously, just by default and by life experience, you're becoming somewhat of a subject matter expert here, or certainly building your knowledge base. And then what? And then this thing happens in California with the measles. I remember that. I remember the news. And then what happens?
Hey, but for a second there, guys, if I could interject, I mean, Josh, sometimes with news, I'm very up to speed, and then other times I live under a rock. So can you explain what happened? Did you say Disney and measles, for maybe the good of the audience? What was there an outbreak? What happened?
So in late 2014, I think it was actually in December, there was a measles outbreak at Disneyland. That's where it started. And that was like, oh man, the world's most highly contagious airborne disease at Disneyland, the second most populated place on earth. And there were a lot of headlines about it, and go get your MMR immediately. And there was a lot. So there was a lot of articles sort of blaming the unvaccinated and saying we need to increase vaccination rates. This is really scary. And then not long after that, California started using that to remove our our philosophical exemptions from vaccination.
Oh goodness. Okay, got it. Mm.
So I'm reading these articles, and again, I actually really don't have a great understanding of vaccinations, but I knew a few things, and I saw that they were lying in the articles about a few of those things, and so that really piqued my interest. They were really downplaying vaccine injury. They were saying neurological diseases are not caused by vaccination. There's a lot of things where I said, that's not right. That's completely false. And, the vaccine inserts say otherwise, buddy.
Yeah,
so,
and your son, and you're looking at your son. You're saying,
right.
Yeah, gotcha.
Right. So that's when I start to really try to find more information. And really what really kind of, pushed me down the rabbit hole was I had read a letter that a mother had written, and she was making just some very valid points about, disease and sanitation, and, sanitation really being the main thing that had diminished disease over time, and the vaccine manufacturers being exempt from liability, all these things. And so I kind of went line by line with her thing. I'm like, is that true? And then I would research it, look on Google, and then I would go to the next line, and then I'd research it. And as I went, holy crap, this is much deeper. And so I just began to continue to research and really I had heard about a movie playing called Trace Amounts.
Right.
And it was playing in Sacramento, and it was like the next night. Yeah, I discovered it was playing the next night, and it was sold out. So I just showed up anyway, and I ended up running into the filmmakers out front, and the woman putting on the Gather event. It's sort of a Gather. It's sort of a thing where people sell tickets to movies and they can play whatever films.
Right.
And they said, hey, we got you. We'll give you a couple tickets. And they gave me and my friend a couple tickets. We went in we didn't have to pay. And I was blown away. I was expecting something extreme and something over the top, and was really, blown away by this movie that, focuses on thimerosal.
And I remember it. And I remember, even some people that, I know people go back and not back and forth, but we're always looking on, ways, how do we communicate, these, what are now very controversial subject matters, in a way that people can get it, people can receive it, people can at least be open enough to hearing it. And I remember watching that movie, even though at that point I had learned some things as well. So Party is like, oh man, come on, like let it rip, right? But it was very well done, right? And that was, a lot of people don't. I don't want to say a lot of people don't know about that movie, but there's been other movies, obviously, and you've been part of some of these other ones that got a little bit more attention. But that was a kind of an important movie for a lot of people, and I haven't heard that title
really
in a while.
Solid.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I saw it, and I thought the first thing I thought, because they had just introduced legislation in California to eliminate the philosophical exemption, and I thought, man, we got this covered. There's no way they're going to be able to pass this with this film.
The naivety, huh? Right back.
Right. Oh yeah, I was green, man. I didn't know what was up yet. But yeah, that is an excellent film, but it is definitely, I think you need a little higher intelligence to follow it because it's very, very scientifically based.
Sure.
So yeah, I've met the activist Laura Hayes, who had organized that event, and she said, I've got an email list. She put me on her email list, and I think about a month later, she had called me and asked me to testify against SB 277, and that was the bill authored by Senator Richard Penn to eliminate the philosophical exemption. And I remember just kind of groaning on the phone because I'd now seen all this hatred towards anybody saying anything negative against vaccination, and really my whole thing was I was on the computer typing. I was invisible. I was not out, and I was like, holy crap, you want me to go testify at a hearing? And so she said, look, why don't you think about it and call me back? And I said, no, I don't really have a choice here. They're coming after our kids. So, it's scary, but I'll definitely do it.
For those people that don't know, just real briefly, so we're talking California here. This has been several years now, unfortunately, but we're talking about a bill SB 277. That's the first one, right? Yeah, and they and that was so those of you that live in other states, you might take this for granted. Many states still, most states, high majority, 44, 45 states still have religious and or philosophical exemptions that allow you, for those beliefs that we just stated, to choose to not have a vaccination. And what I found really interesting, Josh, is, at the time, even in California, and depending on how you want to look at this, fortunately or unfortunately, I mean, vaccination rates are actually very high in America, where their argument that we need to go get this last, 2-3% of people that for whatever reason have chosen not to vaccinate their child, we really were not a threat based on all the medical science that they want to use on herd immunity and these other kind of concepts. And so it was at some level, and it was an artificial problem that was created, like you said, partly in part out of this whole Disneyland thing. And so unfortunately that did pass, which seems, like you said, and I remember this, like, it would never happen. I mean, we're on the other side of COVID now, so we're having a whole other conversations of this now, right? But that was a big deal where a state like California, which does lead the way in many ways regarding legislation, it was really devastating. So you were part of that? You were part of that groundswell there? You were part of that activism and then speaking out on behalf of your son and other parents?
Yeah, well, I ended up getting bumped. My testimony did get bumped at the very last minute, and they had somebody else speak instead of me. So I was just present at the hearings and video recording all the speeches and things like that. And really, that's kind of like one of the things I thought from the beginning that I thought I could bring to the table, because as I had been doing research, all the video stuff that I had seen was sort of like a camera sitting on a tripod at the back of a room where Suzanne Humphries or Andy Wakefield was out like giving these amazing speeches and testimonials, and it looked bad, it sounded bad, but they were amazing. And I thought, hey, maybe I can give these things a better presentation, and it'll be easier for other people to absorb. So I kind of just started hitting the ground running, shooting video. I did testify against another bill that same year, AB 1117, and it was a bill that was going to give financial incentives to doctors to have babies fully vaccinated by 2 years of age. And so I testified against that, and fortunately, we managed to kill that bill.
Okay.
But that kind of everybody was so focused on 277, they had no idea about this other bill happening.
So this started out just kind of by just happenstance. There, you start filming these things just to try to document and help other people see what you're already seeing, and help it be a little bit more digestible to people. So that kind of started another life for you, right? I mean, then you got involved, and if you want to tell the next part of this story.
Yeah. So I'm shooting as much as possible, and beyond just speeches at things. I'm going and shooting vaccine panels at different conventions, and starting to create my own content. And then I see that this movie Vax is coming out, and it's Dr. Andrew Wakefield, who of course I'd read about and been familiar with, and thought it was almost like his comeback, and I was just amazed, and I was really excited to see this movie. And so the movie premieres in New York, and they're doing these Q&As, and there's these live broadcasts that are done on telephones that are circulating. And they're great Q&As. They're very informative, very, very fascinating, and they look horrible and they sound horrible. And, they finally come and do their premiere in California. So I show up, and I have multiple cameras. I managed to get in to shoot the Q&A. So I've got a camera on a tripod. I'm running around with a second camera, shooting the thing. And, the producers, Andy Wakefield, Del Bigtree, and Paulie Tommy are looking at me like, who the heck is this guy? So I think I kind of became on their radar at that point. And then they were coming to Sacramento, and that's where I am at in California. And I had Andy Wakefield's email. So I emailed him and said, hey, while you guys are here, if you have time, why don't we go knock on some doors? Why don't you go knock on some doors at the Capitol and try to talk to some of these politicians? And I'll record it, and we'll see what happens. Something interesting might happen. And Andy said, that's a great idea. And so sure enough, that happened, and I came out and recorded it. And some people may know this incident. They went to go talk to Senator Richard Pan. And Senator Richard Pan is the guy that authors all this legislation, tightening the mandates on vaccines, eliminating the exemptions. And they walked into his office and asked to see him. And the secretary said he wasn't there. And one of our activists says, he's sneaking out a side door and running. So we pop out in the hallway, and there, sure enough, is Senator Richard Pan running away down the hallway. And then Del Bigtree chases him. And so I'm running with a camera behind Del, who's chasing a senator who's running, because he just can't even have a conversation. Yeah. And so that was sort of like my introduction to those guys. And just a few weeks later, they said, hey, you want to come join the team? And I said, yeah, of course. Yeah. Which wasn't easy.
Sure. Yeah. Family. And that's what, again, and that's why I'm thankful you're telling the backstory here, Josh, because, unfortunately, I know many people are grateful for the work you've done, and like those of us that have been doing this for a while, we certainly remember that video. Part of it's comedy, and part of it's just heartbreaking, right? Because it's embarrassing that this is where we're at with things like this. Right. However, thank God it's been documented, and in many ways it was a prophetic video on what we've seen happen over these last years. But then, and then now even, so those people that are not quite aware maybe of certainly many would know the movie Vax. If you haven't seen that movie or any of the movies we're discussing today, please just go watch it. It's worth every second of your time. And then don't only just watch it, share it with a friend or a family member or somebody that you know. So part of what Vax did was they had this bus that went around the country, and that was somewhat almost of an organic, experience of development. I don't think many people maybe knew what it would become, and these families would come to this bus and they would sign the name of their injured child or injured family member or who they were representing on the bus, and it just almost became this, a monument, if you were, whatever the right word would be, right? A tribute to many of these injured children and families. And you began doing some interview, right? Was that part of your role in that?
Yeah, well, I think they were, Andy and Dell were interested in having somebody come out and document the Q&As, and really they wanted me to hold their phones and shoot the Q&As. Yeah. And Polly had called me before I came out, and she said, "Look," she said, "I have parents coming up to me every day telling me their experience." And of course, Polly Tommy, the producer, her story of her son's vaccine injury runs throughout the thread of Vax. So after somebody sees the movie, they watch the Q&A, they want to come over and share their story primarily with Polly. Yeah. And she's like, "These things are powerful. Like, I want to record these." And so I come out and we start documenting them. There's no bus yet. We're flying now, like from city to city. And so people are just coming up and they're like sharing what happened to them and their child. And we're shooting these things in theater lobbies. We're shooting them in alleyways. We're shooting them in parking lots. And we show up in Indiana, and we're being driven by some of the activists who are helping out, picking us up from the airport, taking us to the hotel. And so this activist, Carrie, who's picking us up, we ask her, so, "Oh, how did you get involved in this?" And she says, "My baby died after vaccination." And Polly and I talked and said, "You know what, for this one, we want to get this story documented. Let's go to her house. Let's give her some time to tell this story, her and her husband, and really, this is obviously it's an important story." So we did that. And again, before that, it's just like these little bites in theater lobbies and parking lots. So now we go to her home, we sit her and her husband down and give them the time to tell their story. And this is the story of the Bundys. Yeah. And their son Mason, and it's a very, very sad story about how they lost their infant after vaccination. And we even did an edit including before photos and videos, and we kind of looked at the video afterwards and went, "Holy cow, like this is what we need to be doing. Like, we need to do more of this. We need to give people the time. We need to get before and after photos and videos." And so that's when we came up with the idea for the bus and said, okay, so we took a month hiatus, got the bus together and went out. And it was like, the idea was to have a studio in the bus so we could sit people down, lights, a better professional sound, and really give these people the time to tell their stories. And it ended up being so fruitful.
Let me ask you,
so many good stories.
Just something kind of personal here, Josh. I mean, whenever I do these, I get emotional and I feel always a little guilty about that because I don't have an injured child, and I just happen to know some of that stuff before, right? And so whenever I hear these stories, it just always gets me. But I'm even though you had this injured son, you're having your own kind of lived experience going through this. I can't imagine when you kind of got in a family you never thought you'd be in, right, or a tribe you never thought you'd be in, and you're hearing these stories. I've heard Dell talk about this. I've heard Polly talk about this. I've heard Andy talk about this. And you talk about this. It just does something to you. I can't imagine what you're already passionate, but then you can't, like I've heard Andy say so many times, we can't deny the stories of these families, of these mothers, and these kids. When you see it right in front of your face, what if you just could even take a couple minutes? Like, what? I'm imagining this some level transformed your life. I mean, was there a moment you remember, like, oh my, or was that the moment, the one you just described, or you hear the story that sounds so much like your son's, and you just go, oh my God, right? What happened to that, if you don't mind?
Well, there were multiple things that really impacted me on the tour, and I guess I was mainly three things. Like, number one, learning more about autism, and I had a good idea, but there's a spectrum. A big spectrum, and there's a lot of different people ranging from high functioning to low functioning on the level of most people don't.
So your son has zero autism, correct? He's is that a correct statement? Just it was a physical injury. Forgive me.
Yeah, Yeah, he's 100%. I think he actually was slightly impacted a little bit cognitively for like a year or so. And we had done some diet stuff that we had read about, and I think that helped pull him out of it. But yeah, he's fine now.
So you were learning this more about the autism end of the vaccine injury. Gotcha. Okay.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I was ignorant, like probably most people in this country, to what, autism really was. I had known more, that it was more than Rain Man. But then a lot of these kids were very low functioning that we were meeting throughout the tour. So that was shocking to me. And I mean, there are still families that I can think about, and it raises the hair on my arm to think about what that mom and dad goes through, and the poor child, and how miserable they are. I mean, autism is a very serious thing and can absolutely devastate people's lives. So there was that, learning that, seeing that over all that time, and meeting these incredible autism parents who literally give up their entire lives, livelihoods, bend over backwards. I mean, I met some of the best parents in the world who just gave everything up for their kids and did do everything for them to try to make their life somewhat worth living. So there was that. Then there was also the as we were touring in this bus now that says Vaxxed, people would come up to us when we would go to a gas station, a hotel, a restaurant, and it was just random people. And this is what would happen pretty typically almost every day. Vaxxed? Does that have to do with vaccines? So this is just a stranger walking up. Yeah. You know what happened to my kid? You know what happened to my sister's kid? You know what happened? My brother. I mean, it's just random people off the street walking up and sharing a story. And that's when I thought, because I knew just based on the fact that, vaccines aren't placebo safety tested, that there are likely many more injuries than they're talking about.
Not 1 in a million. Yeah.
Not nearly. But then when that happened, I went, holy cow. I started to think this is way worse than I ever imagined. It's everybody, there's just so many people. And then of course the other stories, and watching it, you can feel a lot of it on video as you're watching these interviews. But I'll tell you what, to be in person and to make eye contact with these people who are, some of these people really sharing these stories for the first time, with strangers, it's you could just feel it through your body, through your soul. And of course, I ended up combing through these videos over and over and over again as I edited them. The Bundy's video, I spent so much time editing that and just going over and over the footage. And it took a toll on me. I mean, it really dampened my whole day. But it also would strengthen my resolve in saying, this is important and this work really needs to be done.
So you have this experience and you're doing this, and then take us through, because I want our listeners to learn more about it. And maybe even right now would be just a good time to real quick. I talked a little bit about the Vaxxed 2 movies, and I know different people involved are different ones, and Paulie Tommy being, a lead in many of those. And then also they can go online, and a lot of these videos that happened are on like YouTube. Are they still up? Is there a place you can direct people that are listening to this and they want to see some of these videos, outside of just those movies? Do you know where that lives? I'm sure you do, but yeah.
Well, I did until they took them down.
Wow.
So we had, I edited hundreds of videos, and these were complex edits, editing the color, correcting these things, sound editing, putting in the before and after photos and videos of these kids before the vaccinations, after the vaccination. They've all been eliminated from Facebook. They've all been eliminated off YouTube.
Wow. Okay.
There's very few left. I mean, the ones that people can find on there are often uploaded by other users that just kind of ripped them off and uploaded them.
Okay.
And it's good luck finding them, because words like Vaxxed on YouTube will not bring anything up. If you can find my page on YouTube, I have some stuff on there. So if you look up Joshua Coleman, it'll bring up Parents for Healthcare Rights page on YouTube, and you can find some stuff on there. But unfortunately, those videos are all deleted. But
wow. So
we have all the originals. I have all the project files, so I can
someday they may live again.
Reprocess them and get them up. It's just going to be a lot of time.
Yeah. So then you have this. Then you got a little. This is kind of getting into more recent time here now. You started getting. I hate the term, so I don't mean to use it with you. Like got a little famous in this space, but you started. I'm imagining you're going through this experience. Tell me the impetus to V for Vaccine, some of your more, public activism work that you've done, because I think so much of it is so cool. But also, I really want you to explain kind of your model behind it, your thought process. I mean, I'm actually sitting in my office right now with a bunch of your signs that we had because we were helping with a protest a few weeks ago, and an activism event. So and then what the V for Vaccine, what that's all about, and how people can get involved. I think that's what we all sit here and we all go, what do we do? Right? What can we do? And you, I feel, have answered that call, not just personally, but giving tools and resources to, moms and dads and friends and doctors, whoever, right? That just want to try to be helpful of what's going on. So do you mind walking us into the V for Vaccine world?
Yeah, let's do it.
All
yeah.
Right.
I so much thought education through video is so important. Getting this information out through videos. It's just really easy to sit and watch something if it's entertaining, if it's short. And so that was sort of my whole gig for a while. And coming off the Vax tour, 2017, I start to see this shadow banning all of a sudden, and I've been tracking hundreds of videos we've been releasing since then. And I did video stuff before then. So I watched the video analytics. I know how a video works. And all of a sudden I'm saying, what is going on? What are these views now? These things are not being circulated. And so, of course, we were being shadow banned and we were being censored, which means, they just, entities like Facebook and YouTube, like YouTube will prevent it coming up in a search, prevent videos from coming up in a search. You search Vax or vaccines or Joshua Coley, it's not going to bring up any material any longer. They censor it. And then,
So you were
Facebook,
being censored before censorship was cool, huh? You were.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like we were the first group to really get it, as far as I am aware of. And we were talking about it. Early 2017, we were talking about it. And of course, Project Veritas just outed the internal documents from Facebook showing that they in fact do that. And they say that they are after not only, misinformation, it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. If it's true, they're also going to censor that. Anything that could make someone vaccine hesitant. Yep. So I deal with that for about a year, 2 years after Vax, and I'm just so frustrated. I'm creating all this material that I think is great and educational, and nobody's seeing it. I'm like, what am I doing? This is pointless. And so then I start doing some public educating, and I sort of experimented myself. I went out to Comic-Con in San Diego, which is a huge event. They have like 100,000 people attending. It's just thick crowds. And I just brought one sign, one giant 2 foot by 3 foot sign with me. Said vaccines cause autism. And
it just even listening to you talk, I feel like, remember that movie, The Network, the guy that's screaming out of the window, I'm mad as hell and I can't take it anymore. It's like, I don't know what else to do. I guess I'm going to go be, and I'm not saying this about you, Josh, right? I'm going to be the crazy guy in the corner holding the sign, right? At least I feel like I know that person saw it. Right. I know that mom or dad or that person saw that sign. I don't know if it's going to be, but me hiding out in my basement and nobody's going to, then I got to do, right. But it's almost like the heck with it. Right. I just got to go do something. I just listening to you, like, I don't know what this is going to do, but at least I know that, shoot, somebody saw it today, Well,
yeah. And I had seen people out there with signs before, religious people. And I just thought, man, there's a lot of people out here. And with that sign, with that message, every single person that walked past looked at it, read it. People were taking photos. And
how was the response overall? Good, bad? What were you? Because that was, I've been parts of some of these. You've been parts of many of these, but it can go. I've been called names, colorful names.
Yeah.
How did it go that day?
Vaccines cause autism. I mean, that was definitely a lot of negativity. There was positivity. I had a mom who walked up to me and said, That's true. I found out the hard way and just kept walking. So, and the few people that did come over and like sort of thank me really did so under their breath. They were like, "Thank you so much for doing this," and then moved on. But no, I did receive. Yeah, I got a verbal beating by a bunch of people, which is, you know, that type of thing doesn't bother me. Sure. You know, I grew up playing in punk rock bands when I was in my teens. You know, that kind of stuff, it just rolls right off my shoulders.
There you go.
But I started to, and then I did another thing like that. I did the Women's March. I showed up with a sign about vaccinations and that vaccine mandates violate women's choice. And again, you know, it was like 20,000 people there, and I was pretty confident that every single person there saw the sign. And I thought, wow, so now, you know, just one individual can get out to this many people. What if we had more? What if we, you know, if I get more people doing something like this with a pretty straightforward, easy to read message on a giant sign? And then the Disneyland was opening up Galaxy's Edge. So that's like their Star Wars land. That was in early 2019. And I thought, man, what if we went out there and did that and got a group of people, and maybe we even theme it. We dress up like Star Wars characters with Star Wars themed signs against vaccine mandates. And so me and my friend Olivia Mikos sort of put that together. And when we started working on the messaging, that's when we really started to think about what messages can we put that on one, if a person only sees one sign, that they will fully understand the piece of information we're trying to get out. Because you never know what somebody's going to see. And we want to make sure it's in context, and that if somebody
accurate and true, scientific, you know, or
scientifically true. If they see this 2 years from now, they're going to know exactly what it means. Because, you know, we have these great signs that say where there's risk, there must be choice.
Sure. That can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. Yeah.
If you don't have the word vaccine in there, they don't know what you're talking about. You know, and so if they don't have that in context, they won't know. And so we really try to make sure that if that was the only words they saw, that they could fully understand it. And so we went out there and didn't tell anybody. You know, there was 14 of us who went out there and did this thing. We didn't say anything to anybody until it was done. And then we put out the pictures and the video to it. And the health freedom community really, really loved it and were, sort of blown away, and it got a lot of circulation. And I sort of thought, okay, well, good. You know, I was hoping that the community would see it, get it, and take the ball and run with it. And they didn't. I think the activists didn't quite get the complexities of it. You know, a lot of them just thought of big signs with messages. And so we did it again at Comic-Con. There was 100 of us, all dressed like V for Vendetta, and we had improved the messaging and made it really, really universal, very, very basic, very. You know, I think an issue with a lot of the people who go out with signs and protests is they'll talk about the newest thing they just learned about a random ingredient in a vaccine or something really complex, something really far down the rabbit hole. And people forget, like, it's just like, we just need to introduce people to the risks of vaccination with the surface type arguments, you know, the very easy to understand and things that can't be argued. You know, why are we out arguing vaccines cause autism when that argument, that discussion's been totally toxified? I mean, people turn off when they hear that, so we don't even go there. So we really started to boil down our messaging.
It does surprise people to learn that. You know, I've, of course, just because I'm in healthcare, but also we all been through this last year with COVID. You know, a lot of people are learning for the first time that vaccine makers are not liable. And that is, you know, then if I can get you to go to that, you know, to your point, you know, Josh, and I know I have a lot of your material that I hand out and things that, you know, V for Vaccine has made, and you just, you know, if I can get you to you know, get your attention with that first bit that is valid and strong and solid, you know, the truth is on my side, you know, our side. Like the next question's, it's only going to get crazier for you, you know. What do you mean by that, right? Or they're not placebo controlled. These are things that most people just didn't know weren't true, and it is pretty intense. And I think that is why you've had some of the staying power that you guys have had. And I guess a question, I know we're in the middle of this, but I think a lot of people, when they think about activism or they think about these events that you're doing, a question that comes up a lot is this illegal? Right. And I think a lot of people get scared because they think, am I going to go get arrested? Am I going to, that kind of thing. And so I know you're so prudent about that. And the events I've done with you, you're always, now I know we walk a line, we live in interesting times and it changes by the hour. And it's going to lead into the next, question a bit about what's going on in California. But I know you've been sensitive to that. What would you just say for our listeners? And maybe if you do want to give us just a word to activism in general for people that are local or they want to participate with an event like you, what are some of the ground rules? You just gave a couple with the importance of the signs. I think you can even, I know you can buy signs through you. I've participated in that. Would you give us a little bit of, 101 activism?
Oh man, it is so easy. It is so easy. It's just a little bit of time. And we have so many protections. And I have demonstrated in so many different states, actually physically been there in so many states across the country. The police are on our side. The police are there to protect us. So basically, you can go anywhere that is a public space. The things that you need to be careful of is you don't want to block cars and traffic, you don't want to block pedestrians. So if you're on a sidewalk, you just don't block the pedestrians. Sure. You stay out of their way, and that's really it. And you don't threaten to kill people. Yeah. I mean, it's as long as you're out there and in a public space. And so if you're we encourage people to go to places that have a lot of people. So for instance, Daytona, when there was 250,000 people out there, we went over to the entrance and we had our signs, and then we're being seen by tens of thousands of people every 5 minutes. It's just incredible.
So when you have people that come up and they say, I'm sure you've had every story in the book from police that showed up or the people maybe at Daytona or the Super Bowl or something that said, oh, hey, you can't be here or, or whatever. You don't have a permit. What's just a general response to that?
Oh, actually, many people don't actually say that. It's very rare that people even try to get you to move from the sidewalk. Okay. But you just tell them that it is your right to publicly demonstrate. Yeah. And the police, I think the police, again, across the board, have a very good education on what is permitted by the Constitution.
All my experiences with the police have been very positive. Now, granted, I'm in Florida, but you know what I love, Josh, is the kind of when I'm walking back to my car with my family, and you get like the wink, right, or the nod. You can just tell they were glad. It's like we can't do this because we got the uniform on, but thank you for being here. I can't say everyone did that, but I'm always encouraged when we're heading back after a long, sweaty day, and the officers are just, you can just tell they're like, it's like, thank you guys for doing this, right? And I'm sure there's been other times, but so you did a lot of this. I love your creativity on it, and then you start. I don't know where you come up with these ideas. And then you said, "Hey, I know where a lot of people are on roads." So you decided to do something. Maybe it's been a couple years now, or when did the first one happen? Yeah, that was probably about a year ago. COVID started happening.
Well, that was the issue. Is the whole idea is like, let's go out with some giant campaigns where there's a bunch of people, with the giant signs, where there's people, COVID. And then all of a sudden there's no people, and it was like there's nowhere to go, and right now all of a sudden with COVID, it's like, man, this is a really good time to be talking about the risks of vaccination. And everybody's home. The only place people are going to is Costco. And so I looked into doing freeway overpass banners and found a company and found some very affordable rates, much more affordable than I had ever anticipated, and started saying, okay, we're going to make even bigger signs and put them over the freeway overpasses. And so I tested that out. It worked great. It was easy. And what we did is we came up, we used a lot of the phrases we were already using about the risk of vaccination, but we did separate banners for each word. And the idea was that we can shuffle these words around and create all kinds of different messages over time instead of having to buy a different banner every time we need to put up a new phrase.
Right.
And that caught on really quick. And in November of last year, we organized this national day of people going out and putting out a banner message.
Well, even international, right? I mean, I saw some in other countries, I think.
Yeah. I think we had 3 other countries. We had Canada and the UK and also Australia.
Awesome.
And in Australia, they had to put the banners up and abandon them because they are so hardcore in Australia there. They had to leave them.
So where do people, they're listening to this, because I know you've got materials and I know other listeners that just are such fans of your work that you have like cards you can hand out and they can scan a QR code and it takes them to the research. And, so if I'm listening to this and maybe I'm a mom or a dad and I'm getting grief from my parents because we don't want to vaccinate or we're concerned about risks or they think we're crazy, where can a person, so the V for Vaccine is a website that exists. Is that, they can go there?
Yeah, it's visforvaccine.com. So V is for vaccine. So it's almost like A is for Apple, V is for vaccine. So visforvaccine.com. And so we have the sign graphics that people can download and go make their own signs. We have tutorials on how to actually build the sign and what kind of materials to get. It's all really easy stuff. We have flyers that people can download and print at their local shop or even on their printer at home. And of course, we also have signs that they can just buy from us. So if you can't print them locally for cheaper than what we sell them for, then just buy them from us. And we buy in bulk. It's not even a profit thing. The only reason why we're even doing that is because we can buy 1,000 signs and sell them for way cheaper than people can buy them locally.
Sure.
And so, but none of our stuff is extreme. None of our stuff is over the top. It is very, very reasonable. Like you were saying, the flyers, they're all based in fact, and we have the QR codes that people can scan with their phones very easily, and it takes them to the government source to verify that piece of information because, people are just knee-jerk reacting to any risks about vaccinations going, that's not true. That's not true. Yeah. And they can, and I've been on the street with somebody where they said, that is BS. And I hand them a card and say, scan this with their phone. And in 15, 20 seconds, they're already reading on the CDC website that what they said was not true is in fact true.
Well, then, and I know that, and you've had some fairly high profile events where you're I think you probably don't consider yourself this, but many do, very brave and courageous. You'll show up at, whether it's a Jimmy Kimmel book signing or a Kirsten Dunst event, Hollywood, or, a Bruce Springsteen concert or, or a Foo Fighters concert. And so, I know you've had some, wild interactions over the years. But I know and I also know that you would say you have an army of people that, that help pull off these events and do a great job of documenting them and getting you pictures and images and things like that and sharing them themselves. However, and this last thing I want to talk to you about, Josh, as we're winding down here, however, California in particular is not real excited about the work you've been doing, right? And they've actually, can you walk us through the most recent legislation quickly and kind of what's going on as regards to the things you've been doing?
Well, Senator Richard Pan, who's authored like so many bills here in California, I've been going back and forth with this guy. I'll show up at his events and I'll confront him, and I've definitely embarrassed and humiliated him and shown him for the fool that he is over and over again. So he has a particular hatred for me. And in December of last year, V is for Vaccine launched a campaign with flyers and signs about the risks of the COVID-19 vaccine so that people could go out in front of vaccination areas and just, give people informed consent about the risks that are involved. And so Senator Richard Pan guts a bill in, I believe it was April. So, he had to have all his bills turned in, I think, by February. He takes a bill that was about something completely different, removes everything and implements a new bill that is basically going to prevent activists from publicly demonstrating, peacefully protesting in front of any area vaccinating.
Wow.
And that's any area. That's not just COVID-19 vaccination area, any area vaccinating. So that's pharmacies, grocery stores, Planned Parenthood, COVID-19 vaccination areas. I mean, we're talking over 10,000 locations in the state of California, and it is completely directed at us. He's using the excuse of the Dodger Stadium incident, which some people may be familiar with, where activists were accused of blocking the entranceway to a vaccination area, which in fact didn't happen. A couple news companies got it wrong. The LA Times got it wrong. And, so much so that the chief of police in LA County came out and said, the activists were peaceful. They did not cause this area to close. But that's Pam's excuse. But of course, when you read the bill, what it limits within that 300 feet buffer zone in front of vaccination areas are no educating, that's harassing. No handing out flyers, that's harassing. No displaying a sign, that's harassing. And that's a very basic constitutional right.
Absolutely.
So obviously, I think, being out there and educating people about the risk of vaccination is deemed as a threat. And now they're trying to stop our right to peacefully demonstrate.
Where does it sit right now, Josh? That bill?
Well, we have had some amendments to the bill. So we've gotten it lowered from 300 feet to 100 feet. But it's definitely gonna get passed. We have a lot of Democrats and they're just all kind of toeing the line right now in California. So it'll pass. But the dumb thing is, and I don't think Senator Pan really realizes this, that campaign that we started is pretty much over. The lines for the COVID-19 vaccination areas are dead. We can't. I was trying 2 months ago to find a spot that had a line of cars or a line of people. Nobody's lining up for these things anymore. So for me, it would be a waste of time to even go out there. I want to go where the people are. I want to go where there's crowds of people and get the biggest bang for the buck. Yeah. So, he's just a dope that doesn't realize that it's too little too late.
Well, Josh, I think you are a great example of what one person can do, right? I know I can just thinking that quote off of, I think it's, as my wife's maybe signature line of her email, but I can't do everything, but I can do something, right? And so you've taken skills and talents and experiences you've had and said, I don't know if I can't fix it all. I can't save the world. None of us can, but I can go make a little ruckus and I can do it in a way that is hopefully, it's legal and well-intentioned and all of those things that we have as currently at least have a little bit left as rights as American citizens in this country that we love and we're thankful for. So I think, but also you've helped multiply yourself. You've done another thing that a lot of us struggle with is, we say this thing so many, right? We wish there was 100 Andys and 100 Dells and 100, right? We say these things and we mean them because they're wonderful people that are fighting the cause, or 100 of you. But the reality is we're all in this bit together, to steal that unfortunate line from COVID this last year. But we are all, and the stakes have never been higher. And the time is now. I don't know what the future holds as far as some of our right to do these things that we're talking about, even as it comes into, vaccine passports and tracking, all the things we're all facing right now in this country and around the world. So we're so thankful for you, for the tools, and of course for what your family has sacrificed to be in this position that you're in. But thank you so much. I hope that people that maybe didn't know about you today, that they're emboldened and they said, hey, I'm not crazy, right? I'm not a bad person for speaking up and speaking out and trying to just share accurate information with people. I've always said, if I didn't know what I know and you did, I hope you would come and get me. Right? I'd hope you, in of course, the ways you're describing today. And so I think we all have that level of responsibility. And one of the things that happens in the community, such as, vaccine injury and autism, is so many parents are so busy taking care of their kids that they can't go there, right? Because they have a full-time job simply caring for their child, and financially the burden and everything else. And so I think it even is more important for those of us, of course you have an injured child, but those of us that don't a little bit and have other skill sets and other abilities, I can take a few hours or a few $100 and participate in this. It's a big deal. And so thank you so much, my friend, and Godspeed to you and all the work you and your team are doing, and we'll talk soon.
All right, sounds good. Thanks for having me on.
If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, and if you want to support the show, give us a 5-star review and share it with your tribe. To learn more about Dr. Ben's work, visit achievewellness.clinic.